everybody. Giddy up. Everybody ready to talk about some exciting Summer League action? Because what else would we be talking about tonight? I have no idea. Is anything else going on in Knicks land? Beats me. So let's start with the Summer League game because they did just play a game, and the Summer League Knicks are pretty good, and we should pay respects to their very good job that they are doing. Hopefully not the last time we see, at least one of these guys, someone that I really care about, Quentin Grimes, in a Knicks uniform. Knicks won 102-89. They go to 3-1 in Summer League. Do not ask me to tell you whether this means that they will be playing in whatever the Vegas postseason thing is. I think because they've won a bunch of quarters and it works with like points and whatnot, my guess is that they'll play again. So this is probably not the last time that you'll see these guys. But yeah, another really good game for Quentin Grimes. I was just noting like clip after clip after clip. I guess let's start with Grimes because it relates directly to the news of the day, which is that the Knicks and Jazz are engaged, as it were, in trade discussions for one Donovan Mitchell. And it first came about, obviously this has been bandied about in different reports over the last several days, but the biggest one dropped this morning with The Athletic saying they've actually talked trade. There have been some additional reports throughout the rest of the day, including from SNY's Ian Begley, which actually stated that these teams talked trade before the free agency started. He mentioned that Mitchell Robinson was discussed, along with, I think he said 3 first-round picks. Today's big report came from Andy Larson of the Salt Lake City Tribune, in which he basically painted a picture of the Jazz came out with a massive ask that was, I think Tony Jones added some, who writes about the Jazz for The Athletic, added some color to that. I think Larson reported that the Jazz asked for a majority of the Knicks picks. I think Jones actually put a number on it, that it was 6 first-round picks. As a reminder, the Knicks can trade up to 8 because they could trade 4 of their own, and they have 4 additional firsts, and that's not including swaps. So whatever, 5 or 6 firsts, Fournier for salary, and potentially Rose for salary as well. And then basically every key young player not named RJ Barrett. So Obi, quickly, and Deuce McBride and Grimes. The Knicks, according to the Larson report, responded with a legitimate counteroffer that has not been specifically reported. My understanding, based on the different things that have been reported and that I've heard and have been bandied about, is that they're okay with the Fournier piece as opposed to Randle. Apparently, Utah wants nothing to do with Julius Randle. Shocker! Why would they not want anything to do with Julius Randle? Anyway, and the Knicks will give them a bunch of picks. How many picks specifically, I don't know. But the Knicks seem to be holding firm on, we're not giving you all of our good kids. The question now becomes, do they relent on giving one of the good young kids? Do they draw the line at 0? And if the reports are to be believed that the guy that Utah wants is Quentin Grimes, well, if you're the Knicks, is that someone that is, I guess the way the question should be posed is Quentin Grimes a deal breaker? And again, it's only Summer League. So again, quoting the great Benji Ritholtz, the great newsbreaker Benji Ritholtz, it is not all of the data. It's not sacrosanct, but it provides you data points. And the data points that we continue to get from Quentin Grimes over the course of the last week have been a guy that is positively vital to what the Knicks want to do moving forward, whether they have Donovan Mitchell or whether they don't have Donovan Mitchell. He is the closest thing the Knicks have to a true 3-and-D wing. You wish he was a couple inches taller, whatever. Beggars can't be choosers. He's the closest thing to a true 3-and-D wing that they have, and he has shown that in spades over the course of this week, and continues to add layers to his game. I love the way he was drawing fouls in this game. He got to the line 3 times, which I thought all on some very – and then after that, after he got to the line 3 times over, I think they were all in the second half, he put that poor Magic player essentially on his ass in what I think was his last basket of the game when he dribbled him up, or he crossed him up and converted a drive. That was just, it might have been his prettiest move in summer league. It was really nice. But like, obviously you could see why, again, reportedly, Danny Ainge wants Quentin Grimes more than Obi Toppin, more than Emmanuel Quickley. And I mean, we can't really suss out exactly where everything stands on this, but like, it's clear that they don't want to pay RJ Barrett, talking about Utah. But like, I think baked into that is the fact that they know that if RJ was in the deal, that the Knicks aren't also going to relent on a lot of picks. So I don't want to make this out to be like the Jazz like Quentin Grimes more than RJ Barrett. I wouldn't say that, and I don't necessarily believe that to be true. But the fact that at the very least, they're not fighting on Barrett. They're fighting on Grimes. They want Grimes. I believe that. It's been reported at multiple outlets. Again, Ian Begley reported that. And you could see why. You could see why a team would want this guy who has 3 more years of cost control and is a guy that will become instantly a tradable asset. I mean, he's a tradable asset right now, but if the Jazz get him, he'll just be a tradable asset in the hands of the Jazz. And that's because every team, it doesn't matter what your team complexion is. And I think I was having this discussion a few days ago. I forget with who at this point. I talked to a lot of people on this in front of this laptop. But, Quentin Grimes or Emmanuel Quickley might not walk into any rotation in the NBA and immediately get big minutes. Same thing for Obi Toppin. Same thing, honestly, with RJ Barrett. Guys who have their primary and their secondary, guys already lined up. Like, RJ needs to become more efficient. There are some teams that just wouldn't want to deal with his growing pains of inefficiency. Quentin Grimes is a guy who could, any team in the league, step on 20 minutes a night, easily. At the rate he's going. Maybe he's not there yet. It's only summer league, but another great game for him tonight. So kudos, good job by him. Miles McBride, Deuce McBride, Deuce baby, welcome to the show. 29 minutes, 9 of 13 from the field. His highest scoring game of summer league. He had 23 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds. Did have 6 turnovers, but 3 steals to make up for it. He looked really good. He drove the lane more than he has in any other game in Vegas. That was nice to see. I am not elevating him to potential deal breaker status. I think at the very least, he added, I don't know if it's 1%. I don't know if it's 2%. I don't know if it's 5%. He added a little something to his value tonight. And that could only help the Knicks as they continue along in these negotiations for Donovan Mitchell. I don't really have much to say about anybody else tonight. I mean, Sims showed you the usual stuff that Sims shows you. I thought Trevor Keels had, a couple nights moments, very low bar, but this was his best game of summer league. Farron Hunt, 13 points. He had a nice little game. Yeah. I like it. Thank you, Andrew, for starting us off from Dirty Dancer. Insert why do you hate RJ here? Yes, that is the proper place for why do you hate RJ Barrett. I don't hate RJ Barrett. And quite frankly, I want to second what Benji said on the pod whenever we potted yesterday. RJ Barrett is a deal breaker for Donovan Mitchell. And if the Jazz were in a different position and they did want RJ Barrett and they said, without RJ Barrett in the deal, you're not getting Donovan Mitchell, well, then too bad. We're not getting Donovan Mitchell. You don't give up RJ Barrett. No, he's not a perfect player. Is there a possibility the efficiency stuff never works itself out and we're sitting here talking about a guy that, never really exceeded or met expectations a few years from now? Yeah, it's possible. Can't trade him away. Absolutely cannot trade him away. Not for Donovan Mitchell. And honestly, just I'm not again. No player is untradeable, but for right now, where the Knicks are at, RJ is the closest thing they got to a cornerstone. So definitely glad that they will be hanging on to him, whether or not they get Donovan Mitchell. I think that's it. Let's kick it off with the chats. I see Andrew has put up here from JD. Knicks Summer League team currently has the best record and point differential. So they probably make the final game. Yeah, I like I said, I would assume so, but I don't want to proclaim that and then have it not come true. But yeah, it would be cool if they got to play and they raised a fake banner for MSG. I don't know who wants to make the fake banner, but whoever's up for that. Looks like you may have one to do. Of course, we get started off tonight in the super chat with the one, the only Robert Cross. I know Robert Cross is feeling some consternation these days. I don't blame him. First time, long time, John. Mark my words, we will rue the day. Rue. We will rue it. Rue. The day we trade Grimes. I can't even enjoy Summer League with a modicum of peace. Hashtag 53 wins. So I sat down today. My wife went back to Long Island to visit her family, took the kids. So I had the apartment to myself and nothing that I had to do. So, of course, I decided to write a very long piece analyzing the Carmelo Anthony trade and comparing and contrasting the Carmelo Anthony trade with the prospective trade that is on the table for Donovan Mitchell. And, you know, I was reminded as I was going back through memory lane of the conversations leading up to that trade and how it got to a certain point. And I distinctly remember it, like, where it was like, holy shit, is Timofey Mozgov going to be the reason we don't get Carmelo Anthony? And by that point, obviously, they had relented on Gallo, they had relented on Chandler, they had relented on whatever the picks were, and it was like down to Mozgov. And like you said it out loud, and you're like, what the fuck, are we crazy? We're not going to get Carmelo Anthony because of Timofey Mozgov? And sure enough, they relented, and in came Melo. Grimes is not in that category. I'm sorry, but he's not. And I know he just played 1 year. He was injured for a lot of that year, or he was out of the rotation or injured. I know this has just been summer league. That dude is good. And I know that he's not a star player. I know he's not going to be like the first or second or third most important guy on your team. I know all of that. It could still go wrong. He's still a young player. But, man, there have been few days that have gone by where, well, I shouldn't say that. I've largely tried to ignore this if I'm being truthful. The fact that the Knicks passed on Mikal Bridges for Kevin Knox 4 years ago, that was such a defining moment for the franchise that have had so many fuck-ups. But that was right there for them on a silver platter. And, you need that player. Every team needs that player. That version of Mikal. Now, Mikal Bridges is the best version of that, probably. Him or Klay Thompson. Well, Klay's better, but whatever. I'm getting off track. You need that guy. You need the guy who you could sick on the opposing team's best perimeter player for 30 minutes a night and not worry about it, and who's going to knock down an open shot when he's presented with the opportunity. And, oh, by the way, can do some other things with the ball too. Quentin Grimes is that guy. You cannot just find a guy like this off the street. I know he was picked 25th in the draft. I know, he was an afterthought at times last year. If you're giving Utah everything that they want, everything that they really want, which is the picks, if you're giving them all those picks, again, you say it out loud and you're like, is Quentin Grimes the reason I'm not going to get the Donovan Mitchell? It might have to be. Quentin Grimes is really good. And I know you could find guys like Grimes, but at the same time, it's harder than you think to find them. And if you find them on the free agent market or you find them in trade, it's going to cost you a lot. So something to consider. Kevin Danishevsky. Man, if they trade Quentin Grimes, I'll really miss him. Good to see Deuce get to the hole. I thought he played his best game. Completely agree. Sam Mitchell shouldn't be commentating. Sam Mitchell's a sweet man. Should he be commenting on games? Probably not. But he seems like a nice guy. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of Quentin Grimes love tonight, as there should be. Ryan Huang, great game, fun game. Great to see Deuce's mid-range game pop off. Yeah, again, when he hit those little baby fallbacks like 10 feet away from the basket, I mean, you love it. They're going in, and like he's only a second-year player, so like sky's the limit, right? And at the same time, it's like, man, it's a hard shot to make a diet on. But listen, he's only second year, so if he's hitting him now, who knows what he could do in a couple of years. But the most important moment of the game, Shams on the broadcast, percent chance Donovan Mitchell is a Knick. Percent chance that Donovan Mitchell is a Knick? I mean, if you go by the Vegas odds, it's like a 66% chance right now? It's, minus 200. I think that's about right. I think about 2 and 3 chance, maybe a little higher. Who else is trading for him? Who else is coming up? Who else is coming up with anything close to what Utah wants? And I think like it's very interesting right now that the reporting seems largely to be coming out of Utah's side, which would seem to indicate to me that they are getting it out there how well this, how much the conversation is progressing and how close they're coming and this and that. Because who does that apply pressure to? It applies pressure to the Knicks. And I think Danny Ainge is very smart and he knows who the Knicks owner is. And he knows if the Knicks owner catches wind of the fact that, we're close to trading for Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell's a 25-year-old 3-time All-Star. Well, if we're close to doing it, let's get it done. We remember what happened the last time they were close to trading for a All-Star in their mid-20s. And the powers that be in New York were trying to hold a hard line on negotiations. Well, guess who got involved and guess who gave away the farm? The public pressure on the Knicks to complete this deal is going to be very real. Now, Danny Ainge, that coin has two sides. Danny Ainge says, I'm fine. I'll take Donovan Mitchell into the season. I'll take Donovan Mitchell into next season. I'll take the motherfucker into 3 seasons from now. He's under contract. I don't have to do anything. Danny Ainge could say all that, and I think part of it means it. But at the same time, I wonder if there isn't a point where he looks himself in the mirror, and if Leon Rose has called his bluff and says, fuck you, we're giving you all the picks that you want. We're going to give you a couple interesting young players. We're keeping the guys that we want to keep. If you don't want the deal, fine, go find a better one. At some point, doesn't Danny Ainge look himself in the mirror and be like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be greedy. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't. God knows he's been greedy before, and it's worked out pretty well for him. I have no idea how this negotiation is going to go. But we'll see. I think it gets done. And I think it gets done sooner rather than later, but we'll see. Maybe sooner rather than later is actually just before the season, but I think it's done. Robert Cross with another one. I am too aggravated to talk about Spider. Slow play the hand. I didn't even see this, and here's Robert backing me up. We are negotiating against no one. What leverage does Utah have besides none? I think the leverage Utah has is, well, for one, it's going to sound very silly. If you don't trade for Donovan Mitchell, then you don't have Donovan Mitchell on your team. And if you're Leon Rose, what fears does that potentially induce? Does he worry about, well, what if we get off to a bad start? Now, I think Leon Rose has a lot of job security. I don't think he'd be motivated by that. I hope he's not motivated by that. But at the same time, I do have to think that, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to use this freaking line. It's the end of when Harry Met Sally. when you realize the person you want to be with for the rest of your life, you want the rest of your life to start right now. Not quite a perfect analogy, because Harry didn't have to give up, I don't know, his apartment to be with Sally. But the point remains. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew typed in the chat. I liked it. The point remains that Donovan Mitchell wants New York, and New York wants Donovan Mitchell. Everybody knows that, and Danny Ainge obviously knows that. So he's trying to use that against them. And then, like, look, let's be real about this. There is always the possibility that another team comes in here. Like, Miami already put Harrow in all their picks on the table, and Utah said no. So, just for argument's sake, now this gets complicated if they extend Hero this summer, which maybe they don't now with the Mitchell. If Mitchell doesn't get, if Mitchell doesn't get traded, but like, let's say they don't extend Hero, and Hero starts off like guns blazing and increases his trade value to the point that maybe some team does give up a few first-round picks for Hero, and then Miami can reroute those first-round picks along with their own first-round picks off to Utah. And then Utah gets that, although Miami doesn't have any other young players to throw in the deal other than the kid they just drafted and, a couple of their mildly interesting young guys. And on top of all that, if you're again, I keep going back to this point. If you're Danny Ainge, what would you rather have? Future Knicks picks or future Heat picks? And I hate to be the self-disparaging Knick fan, but, one franchise has been to, 8 or 9 Eastern Conference or finals or whatever. Finals or Eastern Conference finals. They've had a fuckload of success since Pat Riley's been there. The Knicks, not so much. So if you're Ainge, you want to bet on the Knicks sucking. And I don't blame him for that. But obviously we hope it works out if they get Mitchell. Michael Mirando. What's going on, Michael? Am I the only one who thinks Mitchell is not worth all of this? Really would rather keep our kids and wait for a better fitting star. So I'm going to have a note on this in tomorrow's newsletter. Feel free to subscribe if you're not subscribed. What other star? And I know that comes off as kind of a dickish way to put it, but like, look around the league. I went through my own kind of, in my mind, my list of like the top 20 to 25 guys that if you're a team like the Knicks, you're trying to go after like right now. So like, let's put LeBron James aside. Let's put Chris Paul aside. Let's put, and these guys are still very, very good, obviously great basketball players. Put Kevin Durant aside, who obviously the Knicks are not in the running for. Put like guys like Kyrie and James Harden, who like just the Knicks should want nothing to do with. I'm talking about the 15 to 20 guys that like, if you're the Knicks, these are the guys that you want. And I went through the list, and I think I came up with about 12 or 13 of them had either just signed extensions this offseason or signed extensions last offseason. Those guys are not going anywhere. And then there are another handful of guys like Steph, Giannis, Kawhi, Paul George. These, like, they're on contenders. They're not leaving, even though they can technically leave in like 3 years. Again, we're talking years down the line. Anthony Davis. You think Anthony Davis is going to leave LA? I don't. So who's the star? Because free agency doesn't exist anymore, and they just went out and spent money in free agency to become a better basketball team. They clearly are trying to make this team better. They're not tanking. I'm sorry. I don't care how many fucking picks they accumulate. They're not going to be able to trade up in the draft next year to select what's his face, Victor, or the other kid, Scoot something or other. Like the top guys. They're not trading up into that. So you have to trade for a star. So who's the next star that's going to ask out? The best guess right now, probably Doncic. Good luck getting Mark Cuban on the phone for those negotiations, if and when he asks out. It's just like sometimes it's your card. It's your turn to play the hand. Andrew types Embiid in the chat. I mean, I don't know. Embiid just extended a year ago. He literally, his supermax extension has not even kicked in yet. I think Philly had a really nice offseason. I think, is there a chance in maybe 2 years Embiid asks out? Okay. Maybe there's a chance in 2 years he asks out. And so then guess what conversation we're going to have then? Oh my God, you're going to trade the whole franchise and all of the picks and all of the things and everything for a center who breaks down and is on, about to be 30 and yada, yada, yada. There's always going to be something. There's always going to be something. Mitchell is available. Does it mean you overpay? No, it does not mean you overpay. But if you can get this guy who is, and I agree with what Benji said, I think he has an argument for being one of the 10 best offensive players in the game. You get him. Like, you get him, and you do your best to figure out the rest later. That's where I'm at. I haven't been there the whole time. I think that's where I am at now. The more I've kind of thought about this and analyzed other potential alternatives. That's where I'm at. Robert Cross with another one. First time, long time, John. Welcome aboard, Robert. Quentin Grimes is a deal breaker. That's fine. 3-and-D, my ass. I want this guy in a Knicks jersey for a long time. Hashtag 53 wins. Listen, Robert, you've been watching Knicks basketball since they tossed it up against the Toronto Huskies way back in 46 at wherever the hell they played that game. I don't know where they played that game. I think it was in Toronto. So you know a player that you want when you see one. I respect it. I think he might be. He is more than 3. See, but here's the thing. Like, you know who's 3-and-D? Reggie Bullock's 3-and-D. I think we need to think of a new term for when we talk about the type of 3-and-D guy who can like start on a championship caliber team. We need a new term for that because you need to be able to do a little bit more than Reggie Bullock, for instance, I'm just using him as an example, can do. You need to be able to put the ball on the floor. You need to be able to make not only maybe the initial read, but the secondary read and like so on and so forth. Like that stuff is important. You need to have versatility on defense. And yes, I think Grimes checks all those boxes, and that's why I think Grimes is a guy who, if he keeps on this path, like, I don't know, is he a $15 million a year player on his next contract? Is he a $20 million a year player on his next contract? Those are not guys that are easy to come by. They just aren't. So I don't begrudge anything you say, Robert. Benjamin Riddles. Breaking. Julius Randle gives thumbs down to the Mitchell deal. You know what, Julius? That's too bad, buddy. It's so funny to me, though. Again, I'm not going to get myself in trouble by commenting on anything that anybody else has said on Twitter or otherwise, but I will just say that, like, it is interesting to me that, like, I'm okay with the notion that Julius Randle, like, you want to rehabilitate the asset. That's fine, but could we at least not pretend that the asset doesn't need to be rehabilitated? And like throwing out like Randall's numbers from last year in terms of like his counting stats and like what he did 2 years ago, like that's fine. But the reality is that the Jazz can either have Evan Fournier or Julius Randle as the salary match in this trade. And they'd rather have Evan Fournier, which I think tells you all you need to know about where Julius Randle's stock is at. And I'm sorry, that's not just because Julius Randle has extra years on his contract. Because if you think that if you're Danny Ainge and you're like, you know what, last year was an aberration, we could fix that guy. We could turn that guy into a player that other NBA teams will want, and we'll be able to flip for an asset. You do it, and then the extra years on the contract all of a sudden aren't a negative, they're a positive. I don't think Danny Ainge thinks that, which, again, tells you all you need to know about where Julius Randle's stock is at right now. Kane Marco, take mob general. Any deal involving Grimes or RJ is a no for me. Okay, I think this is where a lot of the fan base is right now. And I'm totally okay with it. I am okay with it. So let's say that Grimes is the deal breaker. and let's say that you could still and and let's say, yeah, I knew it was a joke, Andrew. And let's say that the price to keep Grimes is an unprotected pick swap in 2028, just for argument's sake. Do you do that if you're the Knicks? I think they would. I think they almost certainly would. But like, you want to talk about someone that could come back and bite you in the ass? If things go wrong. Now, again, if you're Leon Rose, that's the challenge of this negotiation is you are negotiating to make your team better right now, and you are negotiating to try to keep enough in place to allow your team to grow to the point of contention. And while it's, I don't want to be like, he can't be worried about 7 years from now, because that's a ridiculous thing to say. He absolutely should be worried about 7 years from now. It's part of his job as the president of the team. Like, there is a certain amount of give and take here. And you can't, you can't just get Donovan Mitchell without giving stuff. So it's just a matter of, what does he want to give, or does he not want Donovan Mitchell? So we'll see. Kevin Nanashevsky with another one. Thanks, Kevin. If they don't want RJ, I would assume that they really don't want to pay Cam, right? All has me thinking that Quentin Grimes probably won't be in the championship game. Look, I do think that's a good point on Cam. And I think if you're Utah, it's like, that's a great question. Like, if does Utah even just, do they want Cam? Like, or do they look at him as like, yeah, we see him as salary filler? I don't know. I mean, God knows that there are people out there who think that Cam Reddish is the second coming. But again, it's just like, if the Jazz don't want to pay RJ Barrett and Tyler Hero, they sure as shit aren't going to want to pay Cam. Because think about it, like, what's the worst thing to happen if you're the Jazz? Cam shows a little bit of promise and puts you in a dicey spot in restricted free agency a year from now. Now, does that mean you try to get a third team involved who is a little bit more interested in Cam? I don't know. But again, it feels like the Knicks have been peddling Cam Reddish since the moment they got him, and no one seems to be biting, which I don't know what you do with that. Jesse Cook, what's going on, Jesse? How many picks are you content with sending to keep, is a great question, to keep quickly Obi and Grimes on the team? They just got 4 firsts for Gobert. I don't think, see, here's the tricky part, is like, the Wolves only had, I think, if Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Wolves only had their own picks to trade. This negotiation is complicated by the fact that the Knicks have 4 additional first-round picks to trade. So, like, if you're the Knicks, I would guess that you would rather put on the table 3 of those 4 other picks, whatever the 3 lowest value ones. Let's say the Wizards pick, the Pistons pick, and the Mavs pick. The Mavs pick is, well, I don't know. You could make arguments that any of those are decent, but those are the 3 ones with the best protections. Those all have legitimate protections. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, Minnesota only had their own picks. So the Bucks pick is probably not going to be good, but that's only top 4 protected, so you never know. So let's, I would guess if you're the Knicks, I almost think part of them would rather have like their own first round pick in 2029 to trade, and maybe like their own, like, no, don't give away swap rights in 2028. And would rather give away 2 or 3 of those firsts. Now, I could be wrong on that. I could be completely wrong. That's my assumption. So when you ask me, like, what would I be willing to give away? I think what I'm really trying to do if I'm the Knicks is I'm trying to get as many of those other firsts into the deal. So let's give them all of those firsts. Let's give them the Pistons first, the Mavs first, the Wizards first, which I think is a pretty good pick, and the Bucks first. And let's give them 25, 27. Let's give them swaps in 26 and maybe a protected swap in 28. So that's, what did I just give away? I just gave away 6 firsts and 2 swaps, one of which is protected. I think that's what it's going to take to keep the kids, to keep all of the kids. I think. I don't know, but that's what my guess would be. And some people might hear that package and vomit on themselves. And that's fine. As long as you are not in a public place. Unless you're drunk, then you could vomit on yourself and no one will think less of you. I've done it many times. Jason M. What's going on, Jason? Leon was the one telling Dolan to get his guy before. That's a great call. I like that. That's true. That's the difference, right? This isn't Leon's first rodeo. Parrish Duggar, what's going on, Parrish? Jalen won't want to now take a back seat to Mitchell. So here's something that I am certainly not reporting, but I'm very comfortable putting out there as an assumption that I have made, which is that Jalen Brunson knew all about the pursuit of Donovan Mitchell well before he signed this contract. It's been an open secret that the Knicks want Donovan Mitchell for a year. Do we really think that Jalen Brunson walked into a meeting with his dad and his agent and his agent's dad, and everybody looked at him in the face and like, oh no, we're not. Don't worry about the Mitchell thing. You're going to be the man here. Like, also, Jalen Brunson's not stupid. He wants to win a championship. He is smart enough to know that if he's the best player on a team, that team's not going very far. Like, that's why I really do think, like, this was about, he wants to be in New York. He wants to be it's about family. It's about the people he's close with. I think that's why he's here, and he got paid. I think the notion about, like, oh, he wants to have a 30 usage rate and be the guy and this, that, and the other thing, I don't buy that. I don't buy that. Matt Smith, what's going on, Matt? His whole family are Knicks fans, talking about Donovan Mitchell. There's got to be some leaks. Anyway, wonder if the play of Ferren Hunt would give him a chance to enter the potentially depleted rotation. Same with Deuce after tonight. No, I don't think the Knicks are. Again, personally, my 2 cents, just my opinion. I don't even think they would rely on Cam in the rotation next year. I don't even think they would feel comfortable giving him. I think they would if they had to, but I think if they had their druthers, and when I say them, I do mean Tibbs, it would be to not give Cam rotation minutes or go into camp with that. So the notion that they're going to give Ferren Hunt rotation minutes, I don't see it. Maybe they sign him to a roster spot if the roster gets cleaned out in the trade. But no, the most interesting thing to me in all of this at this point, if we're really going down the line and looking ahead to see where this might end up, is if the Jazz won't take Julius Randle, which again, the reporting right now is that they don't want Julius Randle. And let's assume the Knicks cannot find a third team to take Julius Randle, and then either they take back a different player or they send a different player out to Utah, whatever the case may be. Let's assume Randle is here. Let's also assume that the Jazz are not enamored with Obi Toppin as a prospect, which based on what has been reported, that is the assumption that I am making. Might be wrong. The Knicks have this room exception sitting there for 5.2 or 3 or whatever it is $1 million. If they're trading for Donovan Mitchell, they're going to spend that money on a player that they think can help them win games this year. If you look at the free agent market, Now, Grant, hold on. Now, I should add, they don't have to spend it right now. It does not go away if they don't spend it. So they could wait for a buyout guy potentially around whenever before the deadline or something for players to be on playoff rotations, and they could sign someone later. And if they have the room exception, they'll be able to offer that buyout guy more money. So maybe that's what happens, and maybe that's what they think. But man, you know who is just sitting out there? He's just sitting out there waiting for someone to call him up and say, "Come home for the retirement tour." And it just, to me, doesn't make sense for Carmelo Anthony to be back on this team if both Randle and Obi are here. Because, again, the one position that is solidified on the roster right now is center. So it's not even like, oh, we'll play Obi at small ball 5 or Randle at small. No, you're not doing that. So I know the East is big, man, but I think the days of Melo at the 3 were over when we had that conversation 12 years ago. The thought of him being the backup 3 for this team now is I can't quite co-sign that. So it's just, that's another interesting little subplot that I've been wondering. Anyway, getting ahead of myself. Ed Paula, what's going on, Ed? Like, there's no way we get Donovan and keep Julius, right? The fit is already awkward without Donovan. I think it's a great question. It's a great question. Again, shout out to Benji. He said it last night. Like, the fit's not good. It's just not good on either end of the court. You need a defensive-minded guy there. Not that Obi is the best defender in the world. And quite frankly, if we're being honest, if we're looking at the defensive peaks, not saying the baseline, the defensive peaks of Julius Randle and Obi Toppin over the last 2 years, Randle's peak has been higher. When he was engaged and he was giving a shit a year and a half ago, he was legitimately, like, he was decent. He was okay. The man got an all defensive award. I mean, give him credit for that. And then, of course, when he doesn't give a shit, he's one of the most detrimental players in the league on the defensive end of the floor. So that's a problem. And then obviously there's, like, what is Julius Randle doing when he doesn't have the ball? So, and if Donovan Mitchell's on your team and Jalen Brunson's on your team and RJ Barrett's on your team, you need someone at the 4 who's going to be a threat to do literally fuck anything at all with the ball or when they don't have the ball. So whether that's a shooting threat, whether that's a lob threat like Obi would be, whether it's a guy who's comfortable firing away, from the corners like Obi Toppin was at the end of last year. Like, you could at least squint and kind of picture Obi in that 4 spot. It's impossible with Randle. So what do if Randle doesn't go back in this trade? You either try to find another home for him, or you take him into the season and you say, look, big guy, we can't trade you right now. People around the league want to see. And again, shout out to Zach Lowe, who said on this pod, he's like, I think people around the league are curious about Julius Randle, but they want to see it. They want to see him play and like produce at a high level again. So maybe they take it into the year. I don't know. We'll see. Irvis Sula, I hope I got that name right. Future Knick picks, same as Heat picks with Spida on the team. Again, I got into this, not got into it, but I was going back and forth with Oakster, I think, on Twitter the other day. I'm not saying that I think the Knicks picks. There's a word slippage there that I haven't made yet, and I probably won't. I'll try not to. That I'm not saying that future Knicks picks are going to be that much better than future Heat picks. But if you are Danny Ainge and your job is to put the Utah Jazz in the best possible position to get the best possible asset from this trade, well, you're obviously trying to get a frontline young player who could be a cornerstone for you moving forward. And I don't think the sort of player that he wants is available. So that's out the door. And then in lieu of that, you try to get unprotected picks from historically bad franchises. And if you're looking at the NBA for the last 20 years, there are 3 historically bad franchises that are below everybody else. He already has all of the future picks from one of those franchises after the Gobert trade. And no shit, he's looking to make a trade with the Knicks because they're one of the other franchises. And you know what? I bet you he called the Kings and said and asked if they were interested in Donovan Mitchell too, because they're the other one. Like, it's not about what me or you or anybody here watching thinks the Knicks are going to be in 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years. It's about playing the odds. And over the last 21 years, the Knicks have had a top 10 pick, or whether they traded away or not, but like they fell into the top 10 like more than half of those years. So, and like, you know, they had the best lottery odds once, they had the second best lottery odds once. I think they had the third best lottery odds. Like, you know, it's not an unwise bet. It is not a bet without precedent. That's all I'm saying. Robert Cross is killing it today. First time, long time, John. Why can't RJ? I have a feeling I'm not gonna like this question. Why can't RJ, Obi, IQ, and or Grimes be stars? Also, Chris and I see a clear path for Anthony Edwards to the Knicks. He might have a clear path to the Knicks in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. And listen, here's the best part. You make this trade now, you give away all the picks. If the next star becomes available 4 or 5 years from now, guess what? You'll be able to trade first rounders until fucking 2034. So you'll have a whole new batch of first rounders to give away for that star. So don't worry about Anthony Edwards. Why can't they be? I mean, I hate this question. I don't hate the question, but it's like we can't sit here and belittle what true stars are in this league. And Donovan Mitchell, like, I'm not going to sit here and go through his numbers and go through his playoff performances and go through, like, his playmaking. Like, Donovan Mitchell walked into the league and was averaging whatever it was, four plus assists per game. And I think he's averaged over 6 assists a game. Like, RJ Barrett is through year 3. He was supposed to come in as a pretty good playmaker. His assists per 36 minutes have essentially stayed flat for 3 straight years. Now, that doesn't mean they can't go up. I think they will go up. In fact, I would bet on them getting up to 5 or 6 per 36 at some point in his career. Maybe that's great. And maybe eventually he cleans it up around the rim. And maybe eventually he develops some semblance of an off-the-dribble jumper from behind the arc. And maybe he gets more consistency on the defensive end. And maybe. And he's by far the highest ceiling of all of these guys. And we're talking about maybe. I think all of those maybes will come to fruition. But with Donovan Mitchell, there are no maybes, at least not on offense. We've seen him do everything on offense. The only thing he does not do on offense is he is not a playmaker on the level of, and again, I talked about this with Benji, on the level of a Doncic or a Morant or a Trae Young or a Steph Curry, you know, those top guys. He's not that level of playmaker. He is a notch below that, and that matters. That does matter, especially when you're 6'1" and you don't always give a shit on defense. Those are real things. Those are real issues. But man, the stuff that he can do and the stuff that he does bring to the table and he has brought to the table in the league, in the playoffs, in the biggest moments, that's real. It's not theoretical. So, you know, I just, you can't run your team on theory and hope if you're Leon Rose. You can't do it. It's just, that's not the job. Yeah, it's the best I got. Forgotten NYC. Time is now. I'm desperate for a star. Get it done. Well, Danny Ainge is hoping that sentiment is the same within the Knicks front office. I think it would behoove them to not be desperate. ML Nair, what's going on, ML? I doubt Dolan gets involved here because there's no Nets threat, and Ainge wants this deal with the Knicks. Need to keep RJ, Quentin Grimes, IQ, and Obi. I hope he doesn't get involved. I don't think he will. From what I've been told, he has not at all. yet. There's no indication that he will. If you're trying to think about reasons why it would behoove Danny Ainge to drag this thing on, I don't know, because I think there's a world that if it drags on, I think it could actually favor there is a world where if it drags on, it could favor the Knicks. If things get really untenable in Utah. Now, Danny Ainge, everybody says, like, if there's any GM in the league that has the stomach for that, it's Ainge. I don't know. We'll see. But, like, fuck, we're talking about Utah, who has an interesting fan base. I'll just leave it at that. And what if things got ugly in, I don't remember the name of their arena, but what if like on opening night, are they gonna like cheer Donovan Mitchell? Like I don't know. I think so. I do think there may be a little bit more motivation on Ainge's end to get something done sooner rather than later. We'll see. Kevin Danishevsky, one more. My head says I do it with Grimes. My heart says no. I think I might be in the same place with you, Kevin. I really don't want to give up Grimes. But my head says you're gonna regret that. That dude's good. He's really good. He's gonna get better. I want to keep Grimes. Eddie F, what's going on? John, what percentage of Grimes' perceived value today, hence the reticence to move him, is due to recency bias? He's good, but the ESPN campaign this week doesn't hurt. I think that's a very fair question. I think it might have a little bit to do with it, but it's not recency bias in the sense that like we're watching him now and thus he's like in our minds and that's why the value is higher. It's that he went home and he made it a point this summer to get better at very specific things. And he came back in Summer League and showed that he had improved at the very things that he set out to improve on this summer, which to me, as much as it says about the things that he improved on, the more impressive part to me is its reflection on his work ethic and his dedication and the fact that, holy shit, this is a young player who clearly has a plan for himself as a pro and how he's going to progress in the league. And he gets up an ungodly number of shots in practice from what I've heard. I think the work ethic is very real. And I think smart teams or smart observers were already keen to Grimes at the end of last season. That's what I'll say. I don't think it's just about this week. I'll say that. Overratedness. What's going on, man? I feel like I haven't heard from you in a while. We might be overrating our young guys. If we try to control our confirmation bias, is Grimes really a deal breaker? I hope he's great, but what is his ceiling? Is he as good as Desmond Bane? Bane is a brick shithouse on wheels. That dude is huge. So Grimes obviously does not have that size, but there is more of a playmaking gene in Grimes. And I'm sorry, but I think he has the chance to be one of the very best role players in the NBA. So, what is that worth? In money, in dollar amount, it's worth 20 to 20. The best role players get paid $20-25 million a year. So, when you're talking about just what is Grimes' ceiling, or let's toss him away, or this and that, no, he's never going to be a star in the sense that we mean star, meaning a guy who creates offense, a guy who bends a defense with the ball in his hands. That's not going to be what he is. But it doesn't mean that he's not absolutely imperative to hang on to. And I would argue, and I implied this earlier, it may be even more imperative for the Knicks to hang on to him, given the realities of their roster right now. and the fact that like you'll get buyout guys and like, but you're not going to sign a guy like this in free agency, and you're certainly not getting one via trade on the cheap. It's not going to happen because there's a reason Danny Ainge wants him. So Mike Self, what's going on? Seif, excuse me, I mispronounced. Mike Seif, thank you very much. Very generous contribution. We appreciate you, man. Plenty to criticize Randle for. In fairness, he didn't have a point guard last season and lost Bullock, the teammate he had the most chemistry with 2 seasons ago. I think the Jazz prefer Fournier because they want to pick in the top 5, not 6 to 14. Oh, man. I love you, Mike. I'm going to have to agree to disagree here. Here's the thing about that Julius Randle didn't have a point guard. Let's pretend that Julius Randle had Chris Paul on his team, right? Or whoever you think the best point guard is. I don't pick the best point guard in the league. Any player. That player, that point guard, right, is at the very upper echelon of the game. The best point guards do 2 things, right? If you're in the Chris Paul division and anywhere under that, you make the lives of your supporting players easier because you figure out a way to get them easy buckets or easier buckets, right? And if you're in the Trae Young, Dame Lillard, Steph Curry camp, and I realize there's a blending of these 2 lists, but just in terms of like general qualities that these guys have, you're creating shots, right? You're creating shots with the ball in your hands. And somewhere in between there is like just simply being a guy who is a threat off the ball. Last year, Julius Randle had as his primary off-ball threat, because Fournier was always on his side of the court, right? He always had a guy who was very, very, very credible in terms of someone that defenses need to pay attention to. So, like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, the Knicks spacing was great because they played a traditional center, and, like, I get that. But at the same time, the spacing that Fournier provided him was very real. So then you're talking about, okay, well, let's say he had a really great on-ball creator. Okay, well, that certainly lessens the load for Julius Randle. But at the end of the day, Julius Randle still needs to perform. He still needs to figure out ways to score, or in lieu of scoring, help his team in other ways, like when he doesn't have the ball, which gets me to that third category of point guard, which is like, yeah, point guards, like true point guards, make their teammates a lot better, but those teammates need to be willing to like accept those gifts. And that means just basic, like moving without the ball shit. That means like pick and roll. It's the most common play in basketball. And it's a play that Julius Randle has almost no interest in running. He runs a lower percentage of pick and rolls than any big man, high usage big man in the game of basketball. And that is a fact. And that is because Julius Randle doesn't play like a big. He plays like a wing. That's because that's how he wants to play. Wants to have the ball. He wants to fuck around 18 feet from the basket. That's what he wants to do. Now, if you want to tell me Donovan Mitchell's going to come here and Jalen Brunson's here, and all of a sudden Julius Randle's going to find religion and is going to run 20 pick and rolls a game and get easier looks at the basket that way, I'll believe it when I see it. Maybe he does. Maybe he does. But we've seen Julius play basketball now for 7 years, 8 years. He's been pretty consistent in that time in terms of what he likes to do and what he does not like to do. We'll see. Hush Zoo, what's going on? And by the way, sorry, one last thing. In terms of like, imagine he had a real point guard. He had one of the greatest seasons in Knicks history 2 years ago, playing with the worst point guard, one of the worst starting point guards, if not the worst starting point guard in the league. And why was that? Because he didn't have to worry about catering to Elfrid Payton. Last year, point guard came in that had some skills and that could have helped him if he allowed him to. But he had to change his game for that player. That's what fucked him up. That tells me all I need to know personally about whether or not a better point guard is going to suddenly transform Julius Randle into a different sort of play. But that's just me. Sorry. Hush. I just popped in, and you've probably been asked this a million times already. How close is the deal? Or is all this smoke, or are the Heat real suitors on Don? I'm sure the Heaters were the Heaters. My God. The Heat would like to be. It seems like they have been tasked with going to find someone who will give them draft assets for Tyler Hero. Doesn't seem like they've been able to do that. And how close is the deal? It seems like the ball is in. Actually, I don't know whose court the ball is in, but the Knicks, the Jazz made a demand, the Knicks made a counter, and that's all we know. It seems to be like close enough that there's a middle ground. But again, shout out to Andy Larson, who reported this for the Salt Lake City Tribune. Who's taking the first step towards the middle ground? That's where we're at right now. We don't know. Mr. Chill, I don't see any words on your super chat, but thank you for the contribution. If Mr. Chill had a comment, Andrew, let me know. Jeremy E., if one of IQ, Grimes, or Obi needs to go, it has to be IQ. He becomes redundant with Brunson and Mitchell. I'm not sure if I would say quickly becomes redundant. I agree that if you're forecasting like eventual playoff rotations, the notion that you are going to have 3 small guards playing significant minutes is probably unlikely. That said, I'm not sure the Knicks are at the point where they should be like worrying about what they're going to do in Game 5 of a tied playoff series in like the Eastern Conference semifinals. That said, I don't want to give up Grimes. I think there's an argument that Toppin is between him and Quickly is the more expendable asset. I say that without any conviction. I don't really feel strongly. I'd like to keep all 3 of them. How about that? Mark Sable, what's going on, Mark? It's great to hear from you. Came in late. Sorry if these questions were asked, but over-under on days the deal gets done, and 2, predicted starting lineup on opening night. Over-under on days the deal gets done. Man, I feel like the league. I really do feel like the league shuts down for the most part after summer league. Although with the Durant thing, I guess people are working overtime. I don't know. Does it go into camp? Someone who has a little bit of knowledge of what's going on texted me earlier today and told me it could happen tomorrow. It could happen in October. And I wouldn't be shocked. So take that for what it's worth. As far as my predicted starting lineup for opening night, I'll take the bait there. I'll go Brunson, Mitchell, RJ. Mitch and they're gonna find a home for and Randle. Begrudgingly. Michael Miranda, what's going on, Michael? What's the next star to pair with Mitchell if we get him? The thought is he'll attract stars, but to your point, none are available in the next 2 years. Yeah, I don't think any are available in the next 2 years. In terms of number one, like guys that could be your number one. I do think that there are complementary stars that could become available. The most obvious name is Jaylen Brown. Now, if you have Brunson, who I don't think is going anywhere, and you have Mitchell, and you have RJ, then that makes you a little small for Jaylen Brown because, like, ostensibly you need a power forward at that point. Would Brunson ever be comfortable, like, coming off the bench if he's here? I don't know about that. I know I've been in a whole thing before about how, like, Brunson's okay not being the number one. That's different than potentially coming off the bench. So I don't know. And I genuinely do not think that they will trade Brunson unless I can't even imagine what would have to happen for them to trade Brunson. So that gets dicey. The guy who is an interesting name for me, and no one's going to want to hear this. No one is going to want to hear this. Is Andrew Wiggins. And that is because Andrew Wiggins is a free agent next year. And the Warriors, while they print money, also have a player in Jonathan Kuminga who theoretically can step in and do a whole lot of what Andrew Wiggins does. Not to mention they also have Moody and trying to think if there's another young player on their roster that I'm forgetting about. No, I think that might be it. They also have James Wiseman. I forgot about James Wiseman. In any case, like if Wiseman and Moody and Kuminga all come along and they keep those guys and those guys get on their second contracts, like, and I know we're talking down the line and like at some point, like guys like Draymond and Clay and like Steph are going to retire, but I don't know. It's like, it's not insane to me to envision a scenario where Wiggins could become available. And even if the Knicks, it depends on some things about whether they would have the cap space available to just sign him outright. At the very least, the Knicks would be able to potentially get in the running for him. Now, Wiggins obviously plays with RJ Barrett on Team Canada. Those guys have nice chemistry. I think he's a very good player. I think, I know it was alongside Steph Curry, and Steph Curry put forth one of the better finals performances that we've seen, but, we do have to say that Andrew Wiggins was the second best player on a finals team, on a finals winning team. Like that is a thing that just happened. Does he answer the Knicks' problems? I don't know. But I agree. There's no obvious answer. So, but you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Here. Eric Ortiz, what's going on, Eric? Have watched for years. First super chat. Oh, thank you, man. Appreciate you watching and thank you for chipping in. KFS is the best in the business. Thank you, man. Can we keep Randle on this team? Too many ball dominant players if we trade for Donovan Mitchell. Long term, he has to go. He knows that. We all know that. I think the Knicks know that. It's just a matter of how and when. Maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe they trade him this summer. And Robert Cross. I love you, Robert. Is it fair and reasonable? No, it's never fair and reasonable to say that Leon sees Spida as necessary for the next piece. I got so aggravated on hitting the heavy bag. Good for you, Robert. Hashtag 53 wins. He's back. Robert's back. I think he just sees like a league where if you don't have a guy who's going to bend a defense, like, what are you doing? Like you need a guy like this. And the Knicks don't have one. And maybe RJ gets close. Who knows? Maybe he keeps growing. Maybe he blows away expectations even more. But they need the first guy. I think they want to get the first guy, and then they'll worry about. I'll end with this. I think they will get him if they feel that they can field a team that can win a playoff series and conceivably give a top four team or a top two team a run for their money. If they feel like they could do that with what's left over, I think they will make the trade. And I think they will feel that they could make it. If they'll make it, because if you get to that point, if you're a Knicks team that gets to that point where you can maybe put a scare into a real contender in like the second round, then even if you have traded away so many picks to get Mitchell, if everything that you still have is all young players, then theoretically, if you're in this market, you should be able to get from that step to the final step somehow, some way. That's how I think they're operating. If you're asking my opinion. Apparently that's it, but Andrew was saying he was hoping when someone would ask me to comment on the rumors that Mitch and 3 firsts was a reported trade that was turned down. I would need more information on that because, like, Ian, so for anybody who missed it, again, Ian Begley reported that Mitchell Robinson, or they talked trade with Utah before free agency started, and then Mitchell Robinson's name was discussed. Obviously, would have to been as a sign and trade, because you cannot trade an impending free agent after the season ends. So it would have had to have been a sign and trade. And 3 firsts. That was turned down. My inclination is to say that if the Knicks could have gotten Donovan Mitchell for a Mitchell Robinson sign and trade and 3 first-round picks, they would have jumped at the chance. And I think I would have to go back and look at the wording, but my understanding when I read it was that Ian was just reporting that Mitchell Robinson was included in a potential trade that was discussed, and that there were likely other pieces also discussed in that as well. Final super chat here from the main connects. Thanks for the contribution. We appreciate it. Appreciate everybody who chimed in on the regular chat and the super chat. You have kept us here. It is now 10:30. This was a good one. This was a fun one. I'm happy that we got into everything we got into. A good discussion tonight. Thank you again for everybody for chiming in. Don't forget, if you're not subscribed to this very YouTube channel, if you are still watching and you're not subscribed, subscribe. We're so close to 10,000. So close. Help us get there, please. And if you're listening to this in podcast form on Friday, don't forget to subscribe. If you're not subscribed to the pod, rate us, give us a 5-star rating, drop a review. I am, barring something crazy happening in the next 13 and a half hours, we're going to have a very a nice guest tomorrow I'm going to be talking to at noon, who should be able to shed some more light on the Donovan Mitchell situation. And that pod will be up for you, I think, by mid to late afternoon. So check your KFS podcast feed for that. I think that's it. Yes, it'll be up by 2 p.m. So barring any changes. That's it. Thanks everybody for watching, and talk to you soon. Peace out.